Hello and welcome to Aviation 101 with Laura. Today we're going to be talking about how to get ready for your technical interview, and this is some information that came to me from some of the people I know who recently interviewed with a regional airline, and they gave me a bunch of information about what kind of questions were asked. And so this video is intended to help you practice and think through the things you know before you go into that technical interview. I'm not going to talk about interviewing skills or anything, more like what kind of questions were they asked at their specific regional airline interview. And they reported that it was about like a 30-minute interview type slot, so not super long or anything. But the typical areas that I would expect you to get is topics about Jeppesen charts, especially airport diagrams, approach charts to 10-9 Jeppesen page, SIDS, and stars. We are going to go over some of the airport diagram and the SID and star, possibly gotcha type stuff. I'm not going to go over approach charts. I have other videos on that I can link to in the video description, along with the 10-9 page and how to use it. Part 121 regulations was a little bit of the things they were asked. The meteorology, there's some meteorology questions, and a few little questions on aeronautical decision making. So key for that, pick the safest answer. Think about what they're asking and pick the safest type of option that is in line with what you would expect for how you need to behave as an airline pilot. I really want to focus and dive in on the airport diagram things first. So what I would recommend is looking at the specific regional that you're interviewing with and doing your research, looking at their main hub airports, because they might focus their questions on those type of airports. So here we have a picture of DFW airport diagram. Let's just start with this. What is this? Well, that is the airport beacon, the little star with a circle. Okay. What is this down here? That is the blast pad down there at the end of the runway. It actually looks a little bit different than some other pieces of the end of the runway, but that is a blast pad. Okay. What about this? This really stumped one of the people I talked to. There's like this strange line of weird jaggy things. I kind of think they look like telephones. What that is that we have half the airport on one control tower and ground frequency and the other on a different one. And that is the boundary where you would switch from one frequency to the other frequency. And you can see it goes the whole length of DFW. Yeah, so basically it divides it in half. And if you look off in the side, the same type symbol is used. I don't know, this person was kind of nervous, so just missed that. But yeah, that is your division of communications in the middle of an airport. Kind of weird. How about this? So, questions on approach light systems, like what's the difference between the approach light system of 18 right and then right next to it at 18 left? Well, this one here at the end of 18 right is the ALSF-II, used for lower visibility approaches. It's going to have some red side row bars on it, whereas the one for 18 left is not going to have those bars, and that is just probably a MALSR, although I didn't look it up, but you can see from looking at that there is a difference between 18 right, 18 left of the approach light system, so I would know about that. This next area that I've marked, this is how they will display a displaced threshold. Okay, so it looks a little different than the blast pad. The blast pad has like little lines on it. You can see that at the end of 17 right, but here at the end of 13 left, we have a displaced threshold. Here is an example of the MALSR that I was talking about before, but I would know the differences between these runway lighting systems or approach light systems. What about this thing? It's kind of buried under the middle of Terminal C. The ARP, that is the airport reference point. So that is a good one to know too, the airport reference point. and it's a little circle with a crosshairs. I've got another example on a different airport that you can see better. This one's, like I said, buried under Terminal C in the parking garage. All right, so let me look at another airport that you could be asked about. Here we have Miami, Florida. This one I've pulled up because it's got a bunch of random little red circles. Okay, and we have this one up here. We have hotspot number 4, HS4. That is a runway incursion hotspot. Now, most people would know that, and the people who were in the interview, they actually knew that. They were totally on it. They were like, oh, that's a runway incursion hotspot. Okay, fine. But also point out, and this would be good, that you can find the detail. This airport at Miami has a lot of detail. This does look like a very confusing intersection, but we have the intersection of multiple taxiways coming in right there. So that's all fine, and the people being interviewed got that part right, but then the interviewer said, hey, like why? Why is that the hotspot reference? And so it turned out that there is, I didn't even know this, but on the 10-9 airport information page, there is more detail on why each of the runway hotspots has been designated. So be aware of that, and you will totally impress your interview people. Okay, we also have a better view here of the airport reference point, or the ARP, and you can see that is basically the geographical middle of the airport. So it's that circle with the little crosshairs in it. Okay, cool. Now, let me move into discussion of SIDS and stars. So here's a star. Like I said, it would be smart to study the airport hubs that whatever regional you're interviewing with might be using, or airports they have a lot of flights to. So first I want to talk about like this right here at Letton intersection. And you should know what those bars mean. Okay, at 290 knots, that makes sense. But the flight level 300 and the flight level 240 with the bar, basically expecting to cross Letton intersection between flight level 300, but no lower than flight level 240. And of course, this is going to be assigned by ATC. What about, and this kind of stumped one of the people who did the interview, there's a little Zubov intersection. Let me go ahead and mark it with my pen. Zubov intersection. And what confused the interviewee here is the little 1. I think he was just got a little bit of tunnel vision, but that little number 1 above Zubov, the interviewer was like, what is that? So right below Zubov, and I've got an arrow pointing at it, there's too much congestion in the chart area. So it's just another of those planning altitudes. So planning to cross Zubov between flight level 240 and flight level 200. That would be what ATC is going to expect you to be able to do right there. So that is the little 1 that you see with the Zubov. Jeppesen technically calls those a ball flag. But anyway. All right, what about this at Jovem intersection and Victory? Why I have marked those. Okay, well, at Victory intersection, it's not a number 1 above it. It's a letter H above it. And what is that about? So the H actually points you down to an area down below that has different holding patterns depicted because, again, the chart is too congested. They can't show all the holding patterns that you might receive at these fixes, but they are predetermined holding patterns. So you would want to be able to match those up to the associated one below the chart. Example, question, you might be asked, okay, you're at 28,000 feet coming in. When should you start a descent to cross Jovem at the minimum altitude? Okay, that requires me to know that the minimum altitude at Jovem is 13,000 feet. All right, so we need to lose from 28,000 feet, and I'm just making up numbers here, minus 13. So just drop the zeros. Make it easy, okay? 28 minus 13 is 15, if I've done my math right. Not always that great in math, but anyway, 15 feet, 1,000 feet to lose. The 3-to-1 rule then says after you've dropped the zeros, multiply however many feet is left, so the 15, multiply it by 3, and that gives you nautical miles approximately before your fix where you should begin your descent. So that's the 3-to-1 rule. So start your descent at 45 miles before Joven in this example that I've given here. But they might ask that on any of these fixes. So I would just be aware, drop the zeros, do the math, subtract how many feet to lose, multiply by 3, and that gives you nautical miles approximately before that fix. And that should generally work for the type of aircraft you'd be flying at a regional. And that's what they're expecting you to do. Okay, meteorology and Part 121 regulations. So some random things that these people were asked about meteorology included the 3 phases of a thunderstorm. I love it. I teach meteorology. So the cumulus phase, sometimes called towering cumulus, the mature phase, and then the dissipating phase. And the interviewee, they didn't elaborate on the thunderstorm phases. They just said the 3 phases, just like I said, moved right on. So not even requesting more about that. RVR and controlling visibility. This would be really a dig into OpSpec C78, the Jeppesen 10-9 pages. How do those interact? How does that different for a Part 121 departure versus a Part 91 departure? Again, I'm not going to unpack that here. I have a whole video that unpacks it. It's actually one of my most popular videos. So I'll place a link down below this video, so check that out. They were also asked about the 3 types of icing: clear, rime, mixed. Again, not like a bunch of detail. It's just things that you probably should know as a pilot, things that FAA test question type of things ask. Again, they can go into however much detail, but yeah, 3 types of icing. When is a takeoff alternate required? That's 121.617 straight up. Again, got a video about that. I'll link to that in the description, and you can do more digging on your own for that one. Questions about the legality of ATC's reported visibility versus the minimum visibility printed on an approach chart. Aha! Now we have to go back to the definition of flight visibility. So flight visibility, if you look at 1.1 of 14 CFR, that means that the flight visibility is determined by the pilot in flight by seeing prominent objects on the ground. And so ATC's reported visibility, again, this is a 121 rule, and I'll probably need to make another video about this because this would be a good one. But ATC reported visibility is sometimes controlling if you are before the final approach fix in a 121 operation. But after you pass the final approach fix, then it's up to the pilot to determine what is the flight visibility. So that's a good distinction to make. So make sure you're aware of that. And if you're not, familiarize yourself. Random stuff. Asked about temporary certificate duration. 120 days. Okay. Medical certificate duration. Well, I'm not going to go into all that because you can look it up in 14 CFR. Okay. Finding the usable runway length from an intersection departure point. Almost like a combination of looking at an airport diagram and combining it with the 10-9 page, or the 10-9A typically page, where Jeppesen will list out various possible runway intersection departures and how much takeoff distance is available. And this was super weird. They were asked about a airway that said BR for its 2-letter prefix. Apparently it's a Bahama route. I'm not going to say that I knew that. So there's a lot of different route prefixes besides Q routes and T routes and jet routes and Victor Airways. So I will link to a helpful article I found from IFR magazine online that explains a lot of the various prefixes that you can see, because I'm not going to unpack all of them. But that brings up a good one. If you have no idea what they're asking, just say, I don't know. Most likely they're going to move on to another question. Again, get familiar with that airport or the airline's operations and their hubs. Get familiar with them because that's possibly what they're going to ask you, and be able to kind of walk through or talk through a arrival or a departure, a SID or STAR. Talk through those because they're going to want to see that you're familiar, and especially know your Jeppesen charts. Okay, if you've never looked at Jeppesen charts, now would be the time to start. Don't expect to go in there and use the FAA/AIS charts that you may have been using for your flight training. You really need to get a hold of Jeppesen and start learning it. Thanks for watching Aviation 101 with Laura. If you've got other technical interview tips, I'd love to hear about it. So put it in the comments and share it with everybody else. Have a great day.